This is Global Order. I'm Hindol Sengupta. I'm privileged today to have as my guest General Deependra Hooda. General Hooda needs no introduction. He was the head of the Northern Command when India conducted in 2016 successfully its famous surgical strikes. Deependra Hooda looks very carefully at India's security situation, especially on our northern borders. He's, of course, had immense responsibility on our eastern borders also during his career in the Indian Army, and I'm delighted that he's joined me today. We're going to talk about something very specific with him today. He's recently written an article in a newspaper talking about the attacks in Jammu and what it means for our security situation in the region, in Jammu, in Kashmir, with Pakistan, and putting the whole thing in context. That's what we're going to discuss with him today. Thanks, sir, for joining us.
Thank you, Hindol. Pleasure to be here with you.
I want to begin by asking you, sir, one of the things that you mention in your article is that these attacks in the Jammu region, are growing steadily. And these attacks are being targeted often at pilgrims. There is a particular nefarious purpose, it seems, behind these attacks because the Jammu region has a mixed population. It has Hindus and Muslims. And by targeting Hindu pilgrims, especially pilgrims going to Vaishno Devi, there seems to be a nefarious attempt to trigger wider society-wide conflict.
So, Hindol, you're right. You mentioned that Jammu has a mixed population. In fact, I commanded my corps, 16 Corps at Nagrota, which is responsible for the Jammu region before I took over Northern Command. And one worry that we always had was that because of the demography, the way it is in the Jammu region, that communal incidents sort of be avoided to the extent possible. And what we are seeing in this group or groups that are operating in the Jammu region is that there is some deliberate attempt to try and stoke off communal violence. So, January last year, we had an incident in Dangri village in the Rajouri district, where selectively, terrorists had entered a village and selectively killed Hindus who were there as a minority community in that area, and now targeting pilgrims who are going from Shivkhori shrine to Katra, where Vaishno Devi is located. Certainly, and it's sort of stirred up, as you see, the pilgrim attack has stirred up a lot of protests and shutdowns in and around Jammu. So that's something that we need to be sort of very, very conscious about, that there is a bit of a communal issue here, and that could then trigger sort of, more wider sort of protests and action.
Talk to us a little bit about what is really going on here, General. Kashmir is seeing, your article also mentions this, record tourist influx. What used to be 16 million, which already made headlines around the country, actually ended up last year at more than 21 million tourists, a historic number by all accounts. Every part of Kashmir now almost is flooded with tourists. In fact, as your article also mentions, attacks and conflicts between terrorists and security forces in the Kashmir region, in the valley, seems to have gone down quite significantly. And yet it's going up in Jammu. What really is happening according to you?
You're absolutely right about growing normalcy in the Kashmir region, where we would see earlier a majority of the terrorist operations and terrorist strikes were in Kashmir, and particularly in and around Kashmir Valley and South Kashmir. And here we are seeing a steady improvement in security situation. The number of encounters have gone down significantly. Deaths in terrorist-related incidents have gone down. Tourism is booming. You said 21 million. I just want to also point out of that 20 million, 10 million actually came to Katra to visit the Vaishno Devi shrine. And so is that going to get impacted if you're going to have additional violence in Kashmir? I think what has happened in Jammu region, and this is sort of my assessment, we go back, 3-4 years, is that with the lot of pressure that was there on the terrorists in Kashmir, uh, I think there has been a deliberate sort of uh, deliberate effort to move into the Jammu region. And what aided this was that in 2020, when we had this incursions by the Chinese troops in Eastern Ladakh, one force headquarters of Rashtriya Rifles has been moved out from here. In fact, that force headquarters was located, its headquarters was at Riyasi. And that was moved out from here and sent to Eastern Ladakh, and so created a little bit of a gap in this area in terms of troop strength. Perhaps right at that time, because there was a sense that things are getting better in the Jammu region. You would also recall there was talk about because things have got better in Jammu, we should pull out the army, give this whole area to the Central Reserve Police Force. Uh, I think a mix of these things uh, actually led to some revival of terrorism in the Jammu region. Of course, now people are taking it seriously. Additional forces have been moved into the area, so some of the gaps that were there have been filled up. The other thing is, normally when you compare with the Kashmir Valley and the Jammu region is extremely vast. The areas of uh, Doda, Poonch, Rajouri, Riyasi lie actually on the foothills of the Pir Panjal range. So it's mountainous, it's very rugged. You have numerous rivers, nalas flowing through this area. Population density is extremely low as compared to Kashmir Valley, which also makes it a little easier for terrorists to sort of take root and for security forces to react. It takes much more time. I mean, you could sit in a vehicle in Kashmir Valley and go from one end to another in 4 hours. In 4 hours, here you'll probably be trekking 4 or 5 kilometers in this mountainous terrain. Roads are very limited, so there are challenges which have led to, as I said, a certain amount of revival that has happened in this area.
You also mentioned in your article, General, that one of the things that has happened is perhaps because of the intense focus on the Kashmir region. Article 370 was moved, a lot of intense attention, security attention on the Kashmir region. Therefore, as you said right now, also there seems to be a swing towards Jammu. And also in the Jammu region, you mentioned the terrain, which sometimes works against. But the other thing you mentioned also was about local intelligence. Talk to us a little about that, because your article talks about how local intelligence could be a force against this, and yet there seems to be some gaps in local intelligence.
So what has happened is, uh, you know, uh, the fight over militancy in the Jammu region was won, and I think not enough credit is given to this, uh, by the support that the army enjoyed of the local population. So there is a mix of Hindu and Muslim population. The Hindu population obviously was always against militancy, but even the majority Muslim population in this area, which is the Gujars and Bakarwals, have played a tremendous role in helping us roll back militancy from here. So if you look at operations like Sat Vinash, which happened, the local Gujar Bakarwal community not only provided intelligence, information, but they physically sort of participated in the operation. Uh, the first Muslim village defense community, a village defense committee, sorry, was set up in the Rajouri district. The first all women VDC. So you had an all women village defense committee in the villages of what is Mara Kulali. Again, in this area, they were all women who were fighting for militancy. So we've had tremendous support of the local population. I think what happens is, when a sense of normalcy comes in, I think the local outreach weakens. We tend to feel that everything is fine. So the manner in which we used to sort of do this local outreach with the community, that tends to weaken. Also, what has happened in the last few years is that some sense of alienation has come into the Gujar Bakarwal community, possibly due to some political steps that were taken. We know that these two communities were very upset when reservation was announced for the Pahadi community, and there were protests by these groups. As I said, perhaps a local outreach has weakened. Recent incidents like deaths of some of the Gujar Bakarwal community members during interrogation, that too tends to sort of impact how the locals look at the army and whether they are able to provide security to us. So I think there is a very, very urgent need that this local outreach be strengthened. And frankly, it's happening. The Army Chief, Gen Manoj Pandey, in a recent visit, said that we do depend on the local communities for information, for human intelligence. So that's again something that I think we need to emphasize.
Talk to me a little bit about these village defense committees that you just mentioned. One of the problems seems to be that the resources perhaps needed by many village defense committees don't actually are available in adequate numbers at the very least. What's going wrong there?
So again, as I said, so the village defense communities in the 90s, early 2000s, uh, were had been set up, sort of as the first line of defense, because you couldn't have military posts in every village. So you had these village defense community members who were armed with weapons and who were supposed to sort of, and they did play a role in, when terrorists entered their village to fight them. They were given training by the army people. As I said, slowly, and it's good to see the history of the village defense committee. Slowly, as terrorism waned, militancy sort of almost vanished. There were a lot of complaints against the village defense committee members that there are no terrorists, but these people, because they are armed, tend to sort of take advantage of their situation. And over a period of time, the importance of the village defense committee is reduced. There was also some talk that the VDC should now be disbanded, that they're no longer required. But now I think, seeing what is happening, the government has revived this scheme, and they're calling them now village defense guards, and equipping them with better weapons. They had these 303 rifles, which are actually no match for AK-47s carried by the terrorists. So that's another good step that has been taken. Now we just need to strengthen, get them more sort of motivated, equip them better, train them better.
Talk to me a little bit about where Pakistan stands as far as India is concerned and Kashmir is concerned at the moment. The Pakistani economy has been and continues to be in grave doldrums. Its politics also, is really going through a lot of trouble. The CPEC, which was its great big dream to revive development in large parts of Pakistan, that has also not really taken off. Gwadar remains in doldrums. The Pakistanis are now trying to make overtures to India to reopen trade and so on and so forth. But India has been steadfast that unless some of the fundamental problems are targeted and resolved in a sense, there is no point in having talks. Talk to me a little bit about what Pakistan hopes to gain in re-triggering violence, for instance, in Kashmir, especially in the Jammu area, as we were discussing.
This has been a sort of very consistent policy, and in some of our meetings, we have some track to meetings where we do meet Pakistani diplomats and ex-military officers. And they have been consistent sort of in their stance that Kashmir is a huge sentimental issue as far as Pakistan is concerned. Some of us in India are often surprised that with the kind of crises that Pakistan faces, uh, they still continue, to stoke up some militancy and terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. And while it comes as a surprise to us, I think this is something that they have been doing all along. So, as you mentioned, a poly crisis in Pakistan, but you still see infiltration that is happening. In fact, 2008, 9, 10, when Pakistan was facing really a brunt of terrorist threat, some of us thought that at least that will rein them in as far as terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, seeing what adverse impacts it had. But I mean, really, they continue to do it. The support sort of waxes and wanes depending on how political situation and bilateral relations are with India. But they have never really sort of turned off the tap and said, we will completely sort of block it. Which is why I think India has made its stance very clear that our main concern is with terrorism emanating from Pakistan, and unless that is addressed, I mean, any other issues really is not sort of critical as far as we are concerned. If you're looking at improvement in bilateral relations, and I think uh, we have a new government in place in both the countries. But I don't think that Indian stance, is going to change in a hurry.
Let's talk also about something very interesting that you mentioned, General, which is essentially how the moving of a Rashtriya Rifles headquarters from the Raisi region to tackle the Chinese threat, in fact, may have opened up the space and the logistical sort of ability for Pakistan to create trouble in a part of the Jammu region. This in a sense, I mean, this is something, it's almost like going back to, college days. We've been hearing this India trying to counter a two-pronged sort of security challenge from China and Pakistan. This almost seems like a microscopic version of that. Do you see more diversions like this, General, where we will have to tackle the Chinese threat more and more aggressively, and that in fact may leave lacunae which will be exploited by Pakistan?
Absolutely, no, that's what's happening. In fact, yeah, in the army, we don't talk merely of a two-front threat. We say there's a two and a half front threat
There's
because
internal
there's a threat.
also.
Yeah, there's a threat from China, there's a threat from Pakistan, and the half front because a fairly large portion of the Indian Army is actually engaged in counterinsurgency operations, both in Jammu and Kashmir and the Northeast. And the problem has only intensified after 2020. So I think the sense that was there among the political and diplomatic community prior to 2020 was that yes, China is a challenge, but it's a challenge that will not manifest in the military space. That really military coercion is not going to be used. Uh, I think at least that notion has been disabused after 2020. And so what you have seen after 2020 is a major shift of forces from the Pakistan front to the Chinese front. So a full sort of strike corps, which is almost 80, 90,000 soldiers, and a number of other divisions, additional forces, reserves, have all got deployed on the Chinese front. And obviously these have come from our western borders. So uh, yes, there is now a real two-front threat. And with the focus on China, there has been thinning out of troops both on the Pakistani front and, as I said, also on sort of internal security duties. Will Pakistan try to take advantage of this militarily at this stage? I don't think so. So they will continue to do this low-level sort of terrorism support because, as you mentioned, the kind of crises that Pakistan is facing, I don't think they will think about any sort of military adventurism. But they will continue to sort of poke you in the eye with what they're doing.
There has been a lot of concern, General, that even as the situation improves in Kashmir, the situation in Jammu is becoming problematic. And especially, I want to go back to the point of attacking pilgrims. This for a long time was not the problem. Pilgrims were usually not attacked directly like this. But this direct attack on pilgrims, as you said, 10 million people went last year to Vaishno Devi. Um, if this prolongs, there could be a major outburst of sentiment, conflict at a more visceral level, not just in the Jammu and Kashmir region, but in other places too. How concerned are you that this might happen?
Yeah. I thought you are right that despite even when there were high levels of violence, you would generally see, I'm not saying always, you would generally see tourists were not targeted. The Amarnath Yatra, in the 30 years, maybe once or twice. Similarly, pilgrims were not targeted. And if this is, some new trend that we are witnessing, and I don't know. We just have to wait and see. And I'm sure the security of pilgrims is going to be enhanced in a big way. But if it happens, you are completely right in saying it's not going to be isolated. The reaction will not remain isolated only to Jammu and Kashmir. We are seeing how social media can actually cause massive divisiveness in society, how narratives can spread. But as I said, I think the Home Minister has also sort of taken up a recent meeting on security of the pilgrims, security of the Amarnath Yatra. So this will certainly become a key area of sort of focus uh, for the security forces. Killing two terrorists, I think, will have lesser impact than if pilgrims are targeted by terrorists in another attack. That could lead to some blowback.
Talk to us a little bit about, a lot of concern has come out, even including with people who have genuinely in the past supported all kinds of, anti-terrorist activities from Jammu. Even such voices, many of them have now, spoken up after these attacks saying, well, you tried to solve the problem in Kashmir and maybe you have, but it has all come towards us. And now we are having to deal with it and we don't like it. And, we feel that by resolving the problem in Kashmir, you've actually redirected it towards us. Do you feel these kind of sentiments, which seem to be brewing and becoming louder, will become a problem?
So, I think I wrote in that article, quoting a security expert saying terrorism is theater. So the idea is that by your action, you spread sort of fear, panic amongst the larger population. And we are seeing the start of that somewhat, as you mentioned, the kind of sentiment that is coming out in the Jammu region, which is why I say it's not really the number of terrorist attacks that are taking place. I think you need to curb this just so that such kind of sentiment does not spread further among the people, and which is why I said I think it's time that we need to take this very, very seriously. Ultimately, we say this is all a battle of narratives. I mean, whose narrative is stronger? The government says we are achieving near normalcy. Terrorist attacks and terrorists say, look, you say things are getting normal, but here it is. We have the ability to strike you. And so who's winning this narrative? And that can only be won by action by the security forces. Merely saying everything is fine doesn't mean everything is fine. Just have to, make sure that this nascent terrorism that is growing in Jammu region is sort of nipped in the bud.
General, the other thing that a lot of people are concerned about is that the Chinese maneuvers in the Himalayan heights are also growing and will probably grow further. As you know, issues in Taiwan begin to heat up and continue to become more problematic. As the Chinese-Russian sort of bonhomie becomes closer, there are all kinds of views that China will do more. You mentioned one thing that enabled the lacunae to be created due to actions of China, but those sort of things could happen at much greater scale. Do you see that happening in the near future?
So let me put it this way, in all that the kind of situation that existed pre-2020, where the borders, yes, there were some incursions in disputed areas, but the LAC, as we call it, the line of actual control, with China was largely peaceful. We are not going to go back to the situation in the near future. I mentioned to you that additional troops have actually gone in thousands to the LAC. There is similar deployment on the Chinese side. I mean, they never had any regular divisions, which have now at least 2 divisions have come in. The infrastructure development that is happening, the roads, the airports, the ability to field large forces logistically to support them, massive infrastructure development, military capability has been built up across in Tibet and Xinjiang. Along with this, all the confidence building measures, military confidence building measures that were there between India and China have all collapsed after 2020, after Galwan. And so you are seeing a situation that is tense. You're seeing a situation where there is mutual suspicion on both sides. We have seen even after Galwan physical, clashes taking place in Arunachal at Yangtze. So that situation exists, and I fear all the both sides obviously don't want to get into a large-scale conflict. That some local sort of conflict between the two sides could widen and things could happen. So we have to be very, very careful about what's happening on the line of actual control.
I will have one or two last questions for you, General. One is we have just charted out, and you have just charted out all the problems that exist, and many of these could well in the coming days and weeks and months become, more severe, more aggression might be shown by our enemies on all of these fronts. How prepared is the Indian army? There is the next big thing seems to be theater commands. There's a lot of talk that will come about soon. New kinds of technologies coming out. Even as we speak, there are reports that India has finalized its first indigenous drone, facilities or mechanisms. How prepared do you think is the Indian army to take care of all of these things? Because while all of these things are happening and all of this new technology and other things are coming up, there are also concerns, including with the Agniveer scheme and other things, that perhaps not every part of the army is as staffed as it used to be. Perhaps there needs to be more competent people, better training, and other concerns. So how prepared are we?
Look, capability development is a continuous process. So changes in your training patterns, greater induction of technology, better infrastructure, for example, at the borders. This is an ongoing process. I just want to say that right now the Indian Army is well prepared for anything that could happen either on the Chinese border or on the Pakistani border. So I think in that sense, I don't think we should get a feeling that there are some sort of fundamental weaknesses, which could cause a severe sort of setback along a border. That is not there. I think what we need to be sort of conscious about is that our future sort of biggest military challenge is going to come from China. And China is really, really improving its military capability very quickly. In terms of the size of its defense budget, in terms of the technology induction that is happening, the pace at which they are building up the PLA Navy, we would look at Indian Ocean as something where, the Indian Navy always sort of held sway because it had a very dominant position. Today, the PLA Navy, the Chinese Navy, in terms of number of battleships, actually exceeds the number that the US Navy has. And they're engaged in a massive sort of naval build-up exercise. So I think we need to look 10 years into the future and see where will the Chinese military be, and tailor our capability development, our sort of manpower resources. What is the kind of structures we need? You mentioned about integrated theater commands. It's something that should have happened yesterday. And I dare say at some stage, the political leadership will have to step in and tell the military, look, whatever sort of differences and disagreements you may have, this has got to be sort of put in place. And also, I know this is sometimes a controversial issue. We need to look at our defense budget, not in terms of as percentage of GDP or in terms of numbers, but in terms of what capability we need over the next 10 years, and how are we going to fund that capability. So if the government can approve a capability development plan and then say, yes, this is the capability that the Indian military must have, and then say, right, we will fund you over the next 10 years so that you develop this capability. Right now, the budget allocations are fairly ad hoc. It's not related to what capabilities you want. But look, here is the money we are giving you. Now you do whatever you want with it. So I think little better planning of our defense budget is also required.
My final question then, General, even as we speak, news has just come out that for the first time, India probably has larger number of nuclear weapons than Pakistan does. There have been consistent reports in the last few weeks that China is engaged in a deeper arms race with the United States. It's expanding its nuclear weaponry, its capabilities, and questions about where India stands, where Pakistan stands. And now comes reports that India, perhaps for the first time, in sheer numbers, has larger capabilities than Pakistan. How do you see these reports?
No, it's required. See, I think we need to be clear that we have two nuclear neighbors and two nuclear neighbors who are hostile to you. And so we cannot just look at Pakistan and say, look, we need to match or have better capability. I mean, the reason why we are developing missiles like the Agni 5 with 5,000, 6,000 kilometers range, more capability, is obviously as a deterrent to China. So we have said India has a clear position that these are not new war fighting systems. These are not meant to be used in war, but these are meant as a deterrent. And if you are seeing the manner in which Chinese arsenal, both in terms of numbers and technology, is growing, and the Chinese might well say that, look, this is all directed against as a deterrence to the US. But the fact is that it does create a security dilemma for us when we are seeing massive sort of improvement in capabilities on the Chinese side. So we also have to do, sort of some matching of that and build up our own strategic capability.
Just one last thing, General. Reports suggest that in sheer numbers of the kind of weaponry the Soviet Union, the erstwhile Soviet Union, now Russia, used to be able to manufacture, the Ukraine war has shown that Russian capabilities of generating armaments is not at the same level of quantity and not perhaps at the same level of quality anymore. Now, India, of course, is even today largely dependent on Russian armaments in our armed forces. How do you see that shifting in the coming weeks and months and years?
So, Dol, in terms of quantity, I think Russia has really ramped up its defense production because of the war with Ukraine. I think the problem is that everything is sort of going uh, into their war effort, and so you're finding uh, some delays that are happening in terms of spares that we require. Even the S-400 deliveries that were to come have got delayed, and you're also right that seeing the performance of Russian equipment in the Ukraine war, some questions have been raised of whether the quality is adequate for us. And I think we are quite conscious of this, that over dependence on Russia has major sort of problems. And slowly, I think you do see a diversification that has started even before the Ukraine war. I mean, from the US, we were hardly buying any defense equipment, and right now the defense partnership is very, very close. And so you will find both diversification that is going to happen, and you will also find a greater thrust on indigenization and an attempt to build up our own sort of defense industry. I think we are going to have face challenges in the next 5 years because you just cannot build a defense industrial base from the ground up in a very short while. So maybe the real fruits of this will come out maybe after 8 to 10 years, but it's a step in the right direction. Meanwhile, I think to a very large extent, at least on major platforms, we will be dependent on imports from other countries. So you just saw the 2019 to 2023 period. India was the largest importer of arms in the world, despite the very massive push we have given for indigenization, which is why I say I think we need to be careful when we talk about indigenization. That something that's going to happen, at the snap of your fingers. It's not. But certainly diversification from Russian equipment is going to increase, and you will see that in the future.
General Deependra Hooda, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you very much for your very insightful comments and your detailed description of what's really going on our northern borders and our immediate security challenges and how we look at our security challenges going into the future. I really thank you for your time.
Great pleasure speaking to you, Hindol. Thank you.
Thank you.